Listeners, some context here. I was having a chat with Den earlier in the week, and in all honesty, like this conversation, I think turned into something really powerful and something that I think can benefit most filmmakers. And I thought it was an absolute waste only being shared with me. And Den had this great idea. He's like, "Can we let's talk about this on the podcast? Like, this is the stuff people need to know about." And I couldn't agree more, which is why I'm here to do this with you and hopefully shed some light. So, guys, something a little bit different. I feel weird hosting your show a little bit here or leading your way.
It makes a nice change. It's like I'm actually following a lot of your philosophies here, which is I'm leveraging other people to do my work for me.
Well, I mean, Den, we've had some recent experiences that led me to a question that I want to lead off with here. And I'm really curious, really curious how we can go deep here and understand this well. But why do so many video businesses stagnate or fail, which is something we see a lot in this industry?
You know, it's a really great question because I come across a lot of filmmakers, obviously, in what we do here. I've been in this industry for a very long time, and I see the same patterns, and my kind of my thinking is that there's a fear. Like we can say we want to grow our business, and we have an outcome for the business, and we might have a revenue goal. We might want to just buy that nice house and be able to take the family away on nice holidays and not have to work weekends. But I think it's a fear of change. It's a fear of risk. I feel there's a more than anything else, as creatives, we have a real scarcity mindset. We all have a balance of scarcity and abundance in our DNA. But I think because many of us start as freelancers, there's a real fear of feast and famine in freelancing. Like you're either working or you're not working. And at certain times in the year, things can really fall off a cliff if you don't do any marketing. And I think most freelancers don't do any marketing. But if you want to kind of build into becoming a business owner, you have to change your mindset. And that's the first place you start. You have to understand that scarcity is very real, and it's something that's built into you. It's like the conversations you might have heard as a kid, like, hey, money doesn't grow on trees, kids, and we can't afford to do this, we can't afford to do that. I grew up in a family full of love, but there wasn't a lot of money around. I think my dad, when at his peak, earned £22,000 a year as a printer, and had a family of 4, and we always had great Christmases and we always went on nice holidays, but it was always done kind of on a budget. So for a lot of years I was like, oh, money's scarce, money's tight, money's in short supply. And so that story was like, and it's even displayed in cartoons. The bad guys have got the money, the mischievous villain has got all the money, and the people that need it don't have it. And that gets you thinking about this idea of, like, somehow there's a big vault of money and it's being distributed around the world, and like it's just bad luck if you don't have any, because the rich have got it all. And the media perpetrates stories of like, the wealthy have all this money, and the wealthy are always dodging taxes, and the wealthy this, and the distribution of resources is unfair. And so we grow up in an environment where culturally the news media and even cartoons want to perpetrate this story of scarcity. And when you become a freelance videographer, there are times when you are feeling very abundant, when there's lots of work around and clients are paying you well, and then you might lose a job, or you might find a client doesn't hire you again, and it's like, oh shit, panic. I wasn't expecting that. So I think there's a real scarcity around the fear of losing something. And so to bring it back around to the question was, why does that then impact businesses, and why do businesses kind of tend to stagnate? Is because of the fear of losing something, the fear of, if they invest in themselves, if they go and spend some money learning about how to become a better business owner, like somehow they're going to lose something. And I find that to be a real kind of a deep level. It's ingrained in our subconscious.
That's such an interesting answer. And I want to give a little elaboration, and I want to go deeper on that, Because really, like, if you look at the last 5 years, video's exploded as an industry, like exploded. Like the trend is like there's so much video being made. Corporations and businesses are spending more on video than ever. Manuals for training within schools and industry are all video now. Like everything is video. And if you've been in a, let's say, any video type of business in the last 5 years, this should have been an absolute boom time. This should have been the best years theoretically that have been in a long time based on that. But the reality of that is maybe not so true. A lot of these guys, or a lot of potentially these guys, and I'm paraphrasing on an industry here, it's not individualized, but that mindset or gap in recognizing that or ability to move past that fear or money can be very, very limiting, incredibly limiting.
Absolutely. And, I think there are businesses, we had Jeff on from Sonic Site a few weeks ago. Jeff had been running his video business for 26 years in that feast and famine. And if you haven't listened to that episode, it's a really good one to go back and check out. But Jeff was like, that was my business. It was feast and famine, peaks and troughs, until he discovered a niche. He discovered that he could supply that niche and they had a need. And because he was specializing in that niche, he was becoming the go-to authority figure. And one school would say, hey, we love that video. Can you help us do that? And then he figured out how to create subscription packages where he could give them ongoing content. And that made it easier for them. It alleviated their cash flow issues. It's worked out brilliantly. And there's a whole episode on that, so I won't go into that now. So Jeff was someone who, had been in the industry a very long time, realized something had to change. But he changed, he innovated. And I think our industry is very innovative when it comes to technology. And that's part of the problem is that, I mean, like, and I have personal relationships with a lot of the equipment manufacturers, and they're just doing amazing things. I've worked with Sony, I've worked with Zacuto, I've worked with, Atomos, Blackmagic, all of the big brands. And I think what they're doing fundamentally is phenomenal. But there's also a culture, and I don't think this is even intentional. I don't think anyone realized this was happening, of scarcity around like the new technology. Like the newest camera comes out, we go from 1080 to 4K, and 4K is a huge leap in quality from 1080p, and yet now it's 6K and 8K. And Blackmagic just released a 6K camera, and I'm like, hey, that looks pretty cool. But there is so much like, now 4K isn't good enough. We need 6K. And 6K is not good enough, so we need 8K. And I think that the practitioners of our craft become overly consumed with the technicalities of making films and ignore the fact that clients literally don't care. In fact, you are an obstacle to getting in the way of what the client wants. The client doesn't care about your equipment. It wouldn't know what 4K is. But a lot of production companies are kind of getting too obsessed with the gear and missing out the why and what people need video for.
Oh, we have to go deeper here. We have to go deeper. And just for context, my wife, who I love dearly, B, she couldn't tell the difference between a 1080p and a 4K video, nor could any of her friends. It's just fascinating, into your point there about how few would probably know the difference. Like it's not the output that's created based on gear. But I want to ask a question on this, because this is the observation I've seen in this industry, and I want to know if you've seen the same. It appears to me that the video industry or video businesses seem to have this tendency, well, if I have the latest and greatest equipment or whatever the newest thing is, that's what's going to drive success in the business. Well, if I've got the 8K camera instead of the 6K one or the 4K one I've got now, well, that's what's going to make my business successful. And they just end up in this turbulence of investing more in equipment and software and computers instead of things like marketing or training or personal development type things. Is that what you've seen to be true?
We did a survey last year. And we've done a few of them over the years. And it's like, what gear survey 2019? I think it was beginning of this year. And I was like, what gear are you using? What are you looking at? What do you think is the next greatest thing? And what's really interesting about that is it's always, you do anything to do with gear in this industry and you'll get masses of people responding. But then I dropped into, and how do you get work? And what are your sources of work? And how much have you spent on gear in the last, 5 years? And how much have you spent on yourself in terms of learning, skills like marketing and sales and how to run a business effectively? And what was fascinating, I don't have the exact figures, but maybe I'll publish the results at some point, or we'll do a podcast on the results in detail, is that on average, a large percentage has spent in excess of $30,000 on equipment in the last 5 years. And the majority of people got work through word of mouth. And the majority of those people had spent less than $3,000, in many cases less than $1,000 in the same time on books and education and learning how to run a business. And I just thought that was absolutely fascinating. But I wasn't surprised by that.
I'm not. I laugh a little bit, and I shouldn't laugh because I'm laughing because this was me as well. Like, I look back and like, this is many years ago, Den, when I was a little Padawan, we'll call it, in the marketing industry. Like, I was obsessed with like getting every Facebook ads tool and every piece of software and like, I think at one point I had like $4,000 in monthly subscriptions. Yeah, hold your breath. Because I had this obsession in myself of wanting, like, oh, this is what's going to go through from there. And then I just laughing at that. It was like, I wasn't spending even close to that per month on, let's say, business owner skills or marketing. So it's prevalent across the industries, it appears, as well.
Listen, full confession, I was too. When I was running my production company, at one point I had a Sony F5, I had a set of Zeiss zoom lenses, a set of Zeiss prime lenses. I had a tripod which cost $15,000 because it was the best tripod there was. And I had everything. And I remember looking at it in the corner, like where that lamp is in my shot for anyone watching the video here. I've got this lamp in the corner of my shot. And I used to have the camera set up there so that when I did videos, it's like, hey, look at my camera. I'm a pro. And I worked it out one day, and I think there was about $50,000 worth of equipment sitting on a tripod, literally gathering dust. Because a lot of the videos I was doing, I was shooting on my smaller camera that had smaller file sizes. I could edit more quickly and with just more practical tools. And then I realized that the equipment wasn't going to make the business because clients literally didn't care. But what I then did was I sold all that equipment. And I went to some seminars in the US. Now, at the time I was living in the UK, and the only place I could go and see these business seminars was in the US. So I was paying flights, hotels. First one I went to was in Austin. I think it was the Digital Marketers Conference. Spent 3 days, flew to Austin for 3 days from the UK. And it blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, like marketing and sales, let's call them different things. Let's call them inquiries and clients signing up to hire your services. And once I recognized that just word of mouth alone wasn't scalable and it wasn't consistent and I wasn't able to predict when work was going to come in, I was literally staring at the phone going, well, I've got no work. I literally used to say, I should be all right. I hope something will come in. It usually does. And then I would never contact clients. I'd literally go onto Vimeo or I'd go on to B&H and I'd be like, oh, the Blackmagic new camera. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Maybe I could use this. Or I'd justify spending time to spend money on stuff that I couldn't afford with cash I didn't have on things I didn't need.
Oh, that's a dangerous trap. And I tell you what, if you keep investing money in that gear and the cycle continues, you can end up in a pretty dangerous position financially as a business owner. It gives you, like, as cash flow gets worse, or as your position gets worse, it gets harder to make moves. It really, really does. So, I mean, I admire that you were able to kind of sell and move on to that stuff, Dan. I think it's really, really powerful there.
Well, I've had crippling debt, and this was around about 2004. I'd broken my ankle in 2001 on a shoot on Mont Blanc in Chamonix in France. Had 6 months off work. Thankfully, I had income protection insurance that was specific to being a cameraman. So I was receiving an income, so I didn't lose the house. But 2 years later, I was filming in South Africa on a show called A Place in the Sun, Home or Away. It was a pilot episode. We were in Cape Town. My ankle didn't feel right. Came home. I went to see an ankle specialist, and he said, okay, so I've had a look at your x-rays and I've assessed you. And And this was interesting because he was a specialist and he was costing like $400 an hour. But I wanted the best advice. And he said, "What do you do for a living?" I said, "Oh, I'm a cameraman." He said, "Not anymore, you're not." He said, "You've got arthritis in the ankle." So my career was over like that in a flash. Now, again, the insurance that I'd invested in covered me for total permanent disablement of my right ankle in relation to being a cameraman. So I'd invested in insurance, which paid off when I had to pull on it. But I just bought a new house. I was probably earning £70,000 a year at the time as a freelance cameraman. I'd pushed myself to the limit on the house. It was a beautiful house. I was like, hey, I've worked hard. I'll have the treat now. Something catastrophic happened to my career. And I generated about $50,000 of debt in 6 months because I had no income. And most of that was on credit cards. So like I've been in that hole where the debt of the repayments, like you need to pay $1,000 a month just on the interest. But then you start to justify to yourself, oh, it's okay, because as long as I can find the $1,000 a month for this, I'll be okay. Meanwhile, yeah, you're looking at equipment going, well, I need more equipment. And like equipment is not the answer. Like everyone listening to this has a camera that's good enough to shoot content to sell to a client with high return. And I think that the real, like my goal in setting up this company 10 years ago, and certainly in the last few years with the Video Business Accelerator, is to help as many filmmakers who are ready to move from that kind of freelance mode in terms of like they've started a business, they're running a business, but they're still in the freelance mindset, but they really want to run a business, is to share all the knowledge I've had over the years that I continue to invest in. I reckon I've spent $150,000 plus on education, business education, because I want to help video business owners succeed. That's my purpose. And I kind of guess because I've been in that hole where I've spent the money on the gear, I've had a $50,000 debt, and I crawled out of it. Now I crawled out of it by going and getting a job in a warehouse for Procam Television in London. And I ran the warehouse. So I went from being a highly sort of sought after freelance cameraman to working in a warehouse, putting kits together. Now that I spent some time building up, and my career moved up from there because I realized I had some unique skills. But I learned about the nuts and bolts of running a business. And then I went to work for a sales company, and I learned the nuts and bolts of sales. And for me, it's about client relations, customer service, and really caring about your clients. And if you really care about your clients, and by caring, I mean, be in touch with them. Like the number of times I ask a filmmaker, hey, when was the last time you got in touch with your clients? It's like, oh, the last job we did. I'm like, so they're going to forget about you. Within a month, they'll forget about you. And what I often hear is, oh, look, they were really happy with the last job and they know where I am. And if they need me, they'll call us because we have a great relationship. And the number of times I challenge, like one of the first things we do in our program is we do an analysis. We do a review of your last 12 months worth of work. We do a deep dive audit of where your work actually came from. And two things always happen. One is we always get a surprise. Where you think your biggest and best work is not normally the case. And the second one is the number of clients you've worked with that you haven't been in touch with for 3 or 6 months. And it's leaving money on the table, and it's incredible.
I absolutely agree with that. I think I don't even know what you would call this, chance to re-engage or re-engagement. We'll go with re-engaging with old clients. I actually suspect this is not just in the video industry, but I'm sure it's absolutely rife with it. This is one of the most ignored segments in business. Like you go to all this effort to bring on a client, do a great job with their video in this case, deliver a quality of work that you're proud of and that delivers on the goal, and then you never speak to them again. Like, what a waste.
I know. But I think a lot of that comes down, again, to scarcity. It's fear. It's like, look, fundamentally, video production professionals are really nice people. They actually are empathic. They care. They're sensitive. We're storytellers. We love to help clients out. We always over-deliver. But in that over-delivering, what happens is sometimes that relationship gets kind of cloudy because things aren't set up properly from the outset. There's no system, no process for how to lay out expectations early on in the process. And so that's the first problem area, and we're probably rolling into another episode with this, I think, probably. But in fact, let's pause there, because I could go on for 20 minutes about this, because I'm really passionate about this. And maybe, Charlie, if you're up for it, you could continue this with me next week, because I think I'm really enjoying this. It's like a chance for me to share all of these insights that I gather on a daily basis working with people.
It's Den Lennie Unloaded, guys. We've got Den just opening up here and dropping all kinds of nuggets. Absolutely. I'd be more than keen to do this again, Den. Now, do you do the sign off, or do I do the sign off at this point?
I feel like this is your podcast. Do you want to run maybe I could leverage you hosting my podcast? That would be cool.
Now, guys, I must also bring this. Den actually played a heavy involvement with setting up my latest podcast studio that I'm recording from now. So I'm rather excited with all the stuff he's been able to help me with here. But this has been a phenomenal chance to use it. So thank you for that help there, Den. And thank you for joining me on the Video Business Accelerator. Where can people go to find out more about you?
Well, it's pretty straight. It's a pretty cheesy plug, actually. I like it. Yeah, I think if you're listening to this podcast, you know exactly where to go to find me. That's another topic, actually, about getting really clear on what you're doing and who you're doing it for, because you want to make it easy for your target market to find you.
Absolutely, guys. This has been an episode of the Video Business Accelerator. You know where to find Den, and we'll be doing another episode like this shortly.
You've been listening